Welcome to Party Today we are going to discuss about Asokan Dhamma. The integration of the Mauryan Empire probably required an ideology that would provide an overarching framework accommodating much diversity at local and regional levels. Asoka was probably the first ruler to have realized the need of an ideology for ensuring coalitions in the empire. This is evident in his idea and propagation of what he called Dhamma. The Prakrit term Dhamma is the same as Sanskrit Dharma, which is popularly but not accurately translated as religion. Asoka's Dhamma is commonly viewed as his personal religious learning. The much cherished notion is that Asoka, out of his deep and genuine remorse of the violence perpetrated during the Kalinga War, became a Buddhist, steadfastly practiced non-violence, eschewed war for good since the victory over Kalinga, and followed a pacifist policy. In other words, Asoka after the Kalinga War governed his empire as a devout Buddhist. That is why he is celebrated as a Buddhist ruler and a sage-like king. Such a perception, as this is largely based on the portrayal of Asoka in later Buddhist annals and legends, especially in the Divyavadana, Asokavadana, and the Buddhist texts of Sri Lanka. It is therefore not surprising that many scholars like D.R. Vandarkar hold that through the propagation of Dhamma, Asoka turned Buddhism into a state religion, and his Dhamma was but a synonym of Buddhism. Recent scholarship, however, examines the nature of the Dhamma primarily in the light of Asoka's edicts as contemporary records dealing with his understanding of Dhamma. But he did not clearly define what Dhamma was, but spoke of several features of Dhamma in his edicts. The edicts leave little room for doubt about Asoka's personal learning to Buddhism. He categorically calls himself an Upasaka or a lay Buddhist devotee. In the minor rock edict at Maski, more specifically, he labels himself as Buddhupasaka. In some recitations of his minor rock edicts, he frankly admits that for 1 year he was not striving as an Upasaka, but he became an active lay follower during the last 1.5 years. The 10th year since his coronation having elapsed, Asoka visited Shambodhi, the place of the enlightenment of the Master. His visit to Lumbini Grama, the place of the nativity of the Buddha, clearly figures in the Rumindai inscription. He twice visited the stupa associated with the memory of the Buddha Kanakamuni, first in the 14th past year and then in the 20th past year since his coronation, when he respectively enlarged the stupa and erected a stone pillar there. Such tours were described as Dhammayata or tours of pity and were undertaken when 10 years had elapsed since his coronation. He prescribed some canonical texts for Buddhist monks in the Sangha to study. This clearly establishes his familiarity with Buddhist canonical literature. Asoka strongly admonished those monks and nuns who fomented schism in the Sangha and the ordered excommunication of such monks and nuns by making them wear white dress, white being inauspicious to the Buddhist monastic life. Along with these epigraphic data, one also takes into account the view of Buddhist texts that during his reign was held the Third Buddhist Council. All these cannot but show him as a pious and practicing Buddhist, his familiarity with canonical texts, his concern for the unity of the Sangha, and his perceived role in the far-flung spread of Buddhism. But his edicts, on the other hand, are conspicuously silent on certain essential tenets of Buddhism, like Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, etc. He also never instructed his subjects to aspire for nirvana, the highest goal for the Buddhist. On the other hand, he considered the attainment of heaven or Svarga as the highest goal for his subjects to strive for. As these fundamental principles of Buddhism are conspicuous by their absence for his concept of Dhamma, it is a pertinent question whether through Dhamma he was propagating Buddhism. But S.J. Thambia feels that Asoka's Dhamma was strongly embedded in Buddhist principle. He has critiqued Thapar's attempt at separating Asoka's personal faith in Buddhism from his public official policy of Dhamma. Thambia argues that Asoka's edicts do not contain any hint at this crucial separation. The contents of his edicts were an outcome of the Buddhist stress on metta or loving kindness, mudita or sympathetic joy, karuna or compassion, and dana or donorship. He also points out that Asoka wished that these successors would uphold the policy of Dhamma and, if necessary, would apply minimum unavoidable violence. Thambia argues that has a close similarity with the ideals of the Chakravarti or universal ruler in the Chakravarti Shihanada Suttanta. Actually, in the light of the debates on the nature of Asoka's Dhamma lies the special significance of his Aramaic and Greek edicts. In the translation of the term Dhamma in Aramaic and Greek, no association with Buddhism is indicated. B. N. Mukherjee's studies in these edicts demonstrate that Asoka had no intention of equating Dhamma with Buddhism. In the practice of Dhamma, Asoka actually emphasizes on the observance of certain conducts like non-violence, the non-injury to living beings, and non-slaughter, or anarambha prananam, avihisha bhutanam, and to put an end to royal hunting or bihara yatra. Asoka prescribes the inculcation of certain virtues for the practice of Dhamma. These are little sin or aposinave, many meritorious deeds or bahukayane, kindness or daya, charity or dane, truthfulness or sache, and purity or sache. To these are added the recommendation for avoiding some vices, violence or chamdiye, cruelty or nituliye, anger or kodhe, pride or mane, and jealousy or isya. Dhamma therefore appears to have consisted of practicing a set of virtues and avoiding a number of vices. These conducts have no sectarian approach, nor are they typical of a particular religious belief. Such principles were in fact intended to cut across religious differences. The relevance of Asoka's stress on self-restraint or Sayame, mental purity or Bhavashuddhi, and gratefulness or Kitanata is therefore not difficult to appreciate. He strongly promotes the enhancement of the essence of all sects, and in that context, restraint of speech is of paramount importance. The ideal of his Dhamma denounces the overpraising of one's own sect and disparaging other sects, because by doing so, one's own sect suffers. This undoubtedly marks his Dhamma with the spirit of accommodation of and respect for plurality. There is little scope of championing any particular creed, let alone Buddhism, in these ideals. Daily life and chorus were also within the purview of Dhamma. Inseparably associated with the practice of Dhamma are respectful behavior to parents, teachers, and elders, seemly behavior to Brahmana Sramana, kind attitude to the weak, miserly, slaves, and servants. Festivities like Samaja, which according to the Arthashastra was marked with revelry, licentious behavior, and drinking, were not in keeping with the principles of Dhamma and therefore banned. Asoka also banned the performance of various rituals or mangala, which he found trivial, and replaced these with Dhamma Mangala. Once again, these principles and ideals are neither specific nor typical of Buddhism. These could be observed by and applicable to various groups irrespective of their ethnic, sociocultural, and material differences. This may explain why Asoka perceived that Dhamma was based on age-old values, norms, and codes or Purana Prakiti, thereby underlining the long-standing commonalities among diverse socio-cultural, ethnic, economic, and religious groups. The application of Dhamma would ensure welfare of his subjects both in this world and the other world. Asoka certainly considered that the application of Dhamma enabled him to act like a father to his subjects, who were seen as his offspring. He said in an inscription, Sabe Munise Puja Mama. The discussion on Dhamma point out that it was not identical with Buddhism, nor was Buddhism reflected on it. R.G. Bosak, however, finds in the universal appeal of Dhamma some affinity with the teachings of the Dhammapada. Ray Chaudhuri considered that Dhamma highlighted the moral and ethical principles common to all religious beliefs. Nilakanta Shastri was the first to suggest that Dhamma represented an ethical code of conducts placed before all his subjects. This idea seems to have been further refined and elaborated by Romila Thapar, who perceived that Dhamma was largely an ethical concept related to the individual in the context of his society. Recent readings into the Greek edicts from Kandahar enlist some of the salient features of Eusebia or pity, the Greek translation from the term Dhamma. B.N. Mukherjee considers that this concept in Greek edict is in fact an elaboration and elucidation of the term Didhavatita occurring in the Prakrit edicts. Mukherjee cites Panini's grammatical treatise to suggest that in this pre-Mauryan texts, one of the meanings of bhakti or devotion was devotion to the ruler. The Mauryan ruler was a cementing factor in the empire marked by diversities and imbalances. Dhamma, therefore, was indeed a very broad-based code of social and ethical conducts. To this must now be added the political dimension of Dhamma, which B.D. Chattopadhyay views as a unifier. The all-encompassing ideology of Dhamma is eloquently expressed by Asoka's aim to maintain by Dhamma, to rule according to Dhamma, to make people happy according to Dhamma, and to protect according to Dhamma. That is, Dhammena Palana, Dhammena Vidhana, Dhammena Sukhyana, Dhammena Gotiti. So this is the end of our today's discussion. Subscribe our channel, like our video and comment. Listen to our podcast episodes. Follow our official Facebook page, Twitter handle and Instagram. For any query, feel free to mail us. For details, see the description.